The fiery bird. I woke up around 7 o'clock. Most likely I'd slept so long due to the 2 days of non-stop mental exertion. As soon as I woke up, I once again wanted to see my son and talk with him about the bathhouse. To tell him this wasn't simply a bathhouse, it was a multi-function structure. It could serve as an outdoor fireplace where it would be great to sit with your friends and family. You could also dry clothing, mushrooms, and many other things in it. You could bake bread and prepare tasty dishes in it. And it goes without saying that you could treat what ails you in it by warming your body with its extraordinary heat. I reflected this way as I walked to the spot where the homestead mock-up was, on the lake shore. When I came out of the bushes, this is the picture what presented itself to me. Alongside the mock-up of the homestead lay an exhausted she-wolf, her legs smeared with clay. About 2 meters from the she-wolf, a she-bear was shifting from foot to foot in a small pit. She was working the clay. Volodya, kneeling, was also using the palms of his hands to smooth out the bathhouse he'd constructed of clay on the bank of the pond. But no, you'd be hard-pressed to call what I saw there a bathhouse. Even my fear at the presence of the she-bear and the she-wolf took a back seat, and I went up closer. The central part of what Volodya had constructed resembled the head and torso of some unusual kind of bird. At the base was a small opening, the entrance to the interior room, extending out from the central part of the structure that resembled an unusual bird were its 2 wings. They were embracing the space. Beneath one of the wings sat a man and a woman who resembled Anastasia and me. A little girl was playing in the middle. It was a cloudy day. The sun would by turns shine brightly and hide behind the clouds. The shadow's play created the impression of a live bird that might lift off in flight as soon as the people went inside it. I could hear Anastasia's voice. She had just come out onto the lake shore, holding little Nishtenka by the hand. This is simply a hallucination of some kind. Since morning I've been thinking of nothing but your bathhouse. There's something extraordinary in it. I need to figure it out. Anastasia stopped speaking. Without finishing her sentence, she caught sight of what our son had constructed. Together with Nishtenka, she went up closer, took a seat by the mock-up, put her arms around her little daughter, and for a short time, while silently looked at the extraordinarily beautiful sculpture, she began speaking as if thinking aloud. Earth, fire, water, air, light rays, man, and all of it in one bird. And such an extraordinary one. A bird resembling an eagle teaching its sons to fly. This structure is multifunctional, I remarked to Anastasia, pleased by her delight. You can not only warm up with your friends in it, but bake bread too, prepare good and dry mushrooms and other things too. Yes, you can, but you shouldn't do that with friends, only with close relatives, but more often on your own. Why? Vladimir, this apparatus might possibly function more effectively than a dolmen. You can meditate inside it. During our conversation, Nishtenka went up to the mock-up and for some reason was diligently poking at it with her finger. Look, Anastasia, is our daughter Nishtenka trying to destroy the mock-up? I think she wants to show that we need to make some small round openings in the cupola. Make little windows that look out onto the 4 sides of the world. Then in the day it will be light inside, and at night the stars will be visible. And I plan to make a round window in the middle too, Volodya added. Nishtenka, as if she'd understood that everyone agreed with her, stopped boring holes in the clay with her finger and slowly, as if reflecting on some thoughts of her own, headed off in the direction of the forest. Anasta, I said in her direction, without even understanding why myself. Nishtenka turned and looked at me intently. The breeze rearranged a lock of her hair and uncovered a birthmark on her forehead. It looked like a little star. The little girl smiled and continued her journey, whose goal was known to her alone. Anastasia continued silently examining what Volodya had constructed. She was trying to comprehend something. Never before had I seen her so concentrated. Finally, Anastasia began speaking, as if reasoning aloud. 5 illuminated circles, and they will move in accord with the movement of the sun and of the moon. They will move across the walls and the floor of the interior oval or round chamber. That is very important. They will illuminate the person. Tell me, Anastasia, what about the person who's inside this structure? Will he be able to restore his health just the way he'd be able to in any bathhouse? It will function more effectively than any bathhouse, or than all of them put together. The heated clay gives off rays that are very beneficial for a person. Blood will move more quickly through the veins, and the internal organs will warm and be cleansed. But specifically, what illnesses can be treated with a session in this structure? A person will receive a healthy effect on his entire organism. Thus it follows that it will be easier for the organism to fight off any illness, but it is possible to focus the energies and direct them to a specific organ. Well, take the kidneys, for example. How can you treat them? How can you direct the energies? You need to pour clean sand into a wooden tub. Roll the tub into the centre of the oval chamber, and when the sand has heated up, bury yourself in it. Only your head should remain outside. Before this, you should eat a good amount of watermelon. The sand is very good at absorbing sweat that comes out of the pores. Well, sweat comes out of a person's body even in a regular bathhouse. Why do you need to lie in sand? But Vladimir, look, in a regular bathhouse, where does the sweat, which comes, for example, out of the upper pores on the back, or the chest or the shoulders flow away to? What do you mean where? It runs down. Precisely, it runs down along the other pores, thereby hindering them from perspiring. The dry, warm sand is very good at absorbing moisture, and the sweat will flow out directly into the sand, rather than down along the person's entire body. It is also good, when you're in the sand bath, to drink a medicinal herbal infusion. And what about the liver? How can you treat that? Does this mean your liver is bothering you too, Vladimir? Yes, it bothers everybody. Effective treatment of the liver in this structure can be carried out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why precisely at 3? At that time, all the other organs help the liver cleanse itself of all the accumulated impurities within it. As well, if you place your palm on the spot where the liver is located and think of it with gratitude, and in your thoughts say to it, "Thank you," then it will stir and begin to restore itself. How can that be, restore itself? What, is it alive or something? Of course it's alive. Just are all the organs of your body. But why can you meditate well in this structure? You said it might possibly be more powerful than in a dolmen. People who entered into a dolmen would go off into internal meditation. They were trying to transmit information to their descendants. The dolmen aided them in this. This unique apparatus is even more effective than a dolmen. It can help transmit information, but it can also, under certain conditions, receive information from the universe and transmit it to the person inside, while hiding away deep within itself any negative information. Anastasia suddenly fell silent, looked at our son and asked him, "Are you wanting to add something else to the homestead design, Volodya?" "Yes, Mama, but I first want to be alone for a bit and think." "All right, we won't hinder you." She took Nastenka by the hand, intending to leave, but Volodya said, "Let let Nastenka stay, and Nastenka, hearing her brother's request, quickly slipped out of Anastasia's arms and headed for the mock-up. Anastasia and I left. End of that chapter. Don't judge too harshly. I'll take that bit out. The next morning, Anastasia and I decided to go over to her grandfather's glade. I'd long been asking her to show me this spot, his glade, and besides that, I wanted to have a chat with him. According to what Anastasia has said, it would take no less than 3 hours to walk to her grandfather's glade. Consequently, such a hike might take up an entire day, but it's stretched out to 2 days. Even as we made our way through the taiga to her grandfather's glade, Anastasia and I spoke about homesteads. You know, Anastasia, many people who build family homesteads feel they shouldn't run electricity to their homestead or use all kinds of technology. Others do use it. And what do you think, Vladimir? I think that at the beginning stage, you can't get along without technology and even without professional builders. You might possibly be right, Vladimir. Let the technical means that have accumulated over the centuries be used for good. A unity of opposites will result. But I think we must design life so that in the future we will gradually do without them. For some time I walked silently behind Anastasia. I was stepping over the fallen trunks of old trees, skirting thickets of bushes along the invisible path, and thinking my own thoughts. And maybe for that reason I fell a bit behind. I even lost sight of her. But then, after I'd taken a few more steps, I heard Anastasia's voice. "You must be tired, Vladimir. We can take a rest. Let's take a seat." I agreed. Let's. This isn't the easiest path. We've only been walking an hour, but it feels like as if we've gone 10 kilometres. We sat down on a tree trunk. Anastasia held out a handful of currants to me that she'd collected along the way. I silently ate the delicious berries from the Siberian taiga and continued to think about my unpleasant situation. Then I decided to tell Anastasia about it. Anastasia, it so happens that for a number of years now, I've been thinking about a situation I find unpleasant. In one of the books, I told about the inception of Christianity in Rus and included historical facts and information from museums, and I ended up with negative information. This whole inception looked like a takeover of Russia. It seemed as if I'd laid out all the accurate facts and conclusions, but now I have an unpleasant feeling in my heart, and for years now I've been tormented by doubts. Why unpleasant, Vladimir? Is it because certain representatives of the church have been responding badly to you? That's not it. I'm already used to that. It's something else I just can't figure out. What is it, Vladimir? When I wrote about the baptism of Rus in such negative terms, then it ended up that I was saying something negative not about some specific person, but about everyone all at once. Only afterwards did I get that no way I should have done that. And how did you come to that understanding, Vladimir? I spent the best years of my childhood at my grandparents' place in the village of Kuchnichi. I remember lots of details from living there. I remember that there, in the little Ukrainian hut, on a table in the corner, were Orthodox icons. My grandmother would decorate them with an embroidered towel and light a little lamp. I also remember the way my mum would attend church. Even with her ailing legs, I often recall my spiritual father, Father Feodorit, the archpriest of Trinity St. Sergius Lavra Monastery. To this day, I still keep the Bible he gave me. And so it turns out that by speaking out negatively about Christianity, I was speaking out negatively about my grandparents, my mother, and my spiritual father, Feodorit. Well, and maybe about many good and worthy people too. When I realised all this, then the first chance I got, I appeared on television on Channel 1 and apologised to the church. But it didn't feel much better after I did that. What else do you think I need to do to expiate my guilt before the people close to me, and before myself too, maybe? I think you need to fully comprehend everything and summon up a positive image that will eclipse the negative. Of course, it's easy to say comprehend everything. I've been trying to do that for more than a year, and I'm not doing such a great job. But tell me, how do you feel about religions? Maybe you prefer some and disavow or even reject some other false ones. Vladimir, I don't understand what meaning you assign to the word disavow, but I will try to show you the links in your family chain. Take this twig here. That will serve as your saber for severing these links of the chain that you disavow. A depiction of a long chain of people holding hands arose in the space. The people of the first group wore crosses and little icons around their necks. Do you see, Vladimir? These are your relatives of the Orthodox faith, and these wearing turbans are Muslims. They also figure in your genealogy. And now here is a large group of people who today are called pagans. Next, holding hands, come your forebears from the Vedic period. Behind them come the blurred outlines of people of the first race. And we can also say of them that these are people from the first civilization on Earth. They are blurry because information regarding them has not been articulated in the space, but your relatives are present there too. The first person in this family chain was created by God, and he even now holds the hands of God. In all who follow also exists a particle of God. And one day it will come to pass that the next person born of your line will come to know all and will sense everyone. He will also link hands with God. It may be that this will be you, or it may be your great-granddaughters. The circle will be formed. The circle, Alpha and Omega and Alpha once more. But now think and tell me, which of these groups of people would you like to remove from the chain? I have to think about which one. Wait, Anastasia, wait. But if I remove even one group of people, then, the chain will be broken. Of course, it will be broken. And if it is broken, then the person who breaks it can never come to know God, link hands with him and form the circle. I also think that he will be unable to do this. So what does that mean? Should a person accept absolutely all religions? Which religion to accept? That is the choice of each person, but I think we should disavow nothing from the path humanity has followed. It's possible that all that occurred in the past is essential for today's awareness. What you consider to be good is essential to accept. That which to your mind appears negative is essential simply to know, in order that it should not reoccur going forward, but not to be rejected. But what about if you don't know? Will it necessarily have to recur, and in the very same way? Yes, it will recur. There will come prophet who seems the bearer of the new. Those who have forgotten will hark unto him in delight, not knowing that in doing so they create nothing new. But really, it's impossible to know with precision everything that has happened to mankind since the time of creation. Historians distort even the most recent historical events to curry favour with those in power. Within you, Vladimir, and within each person alive on Earth, there exists a particle containing all information of your family line, from creation up to the present day. I understand this information is stored in each person on the genetic level, but how can we learn to make use of it? That's the question. By not disavowing and not rejecting even a smidgen of your particle. But nobody has the least intention of rejecting their own particle. When you disavow information about the past that has come to you from outside, you at the same time reject that particle that is within you. But what about if this information is false? The particle with false information is also within you. It has been preserved so that you might gain insight into the lie. But Anastasia, really, you were the one who showed me and told me about how the black monks killed the Vedic Russian family who didn't want to betray their faith and their way of life. I wrote about that in a book. The image of the Vedic Russians turned out very powerfully. That's what many people have said, and I often recall it, especially the picture when the wounded Vedic Russian, the artist, is lying under the pine tree, clutching to his chest the figurine he'd carved of the woman he loved. He'd loved her his whole life, but she'd married another. He kept on loving her, hiding his love. Only when he'd carved figurines, they'd always end up looking like her. He, an old elder, entered into battle with a whole enemy detachment in order to lead them away from the family of the woman he loved, and he was wounded. And I wrote your words. The Vedic Russian lay on the grass and did not moan. A small stream of blood flowed from his chest. The wooden pine tree did not know how to cry. Well, do you remember? Yes, Vladimir, I remember this emotional scene. Well, so after this picture, then how can I, or someone else, not reject the black monks? Tell me, Vladimir, who do you feel yourself to be? That wounded Vedic Russian or the black monk? Me? Who am I? That means that's why you showed this, to determine. But what's that got to do with me? Back there in the past, in that picture, your forebears were there. Who were they? What do you think, Vladimir? I don't know. I'd like it if they were the Vedic Russians. Of course they were the Vedic Russians, because the black monks came to roost from a different state. Tell me, Anastasia, have I understood all this correctly? Tell me. Vladimir, don't get agitated. Take in the information calmly. Your ancestors really were Vedic Russians. But the screeching black monk too was your ancestor. Everything arose from the whole, and this means all are brothers. Forgetting this, peoples fight among themselves, thereby destroying within their opponent their own selves. It was this way, perhaps, for a reason. With the beginning of the new millennium, a new era has arrived as a new awareness of existence on Earth. The era of the beautiful transformation of the Earth. It's arrived. It's already arrived. Basically, I have a feeling inside me too that something new is going on in the world, especially when I see the way people are setting up entire settlements of family homesteads in deserted spaces. Are they the ones who will lead the new era forward? Their awareness and feelings represent something new for the world. But on the other hand, you watch the news on television and everything there is just the same as it's been. Right off the bat, they talk about who among the leaders met with whom and how much oil costs and how many years now they have been harping on about an economic crisis, but they don't suggest anything of significance. On television, Vladimir, you are seeing news of the past life. The universe is already alive through different dimensions. Commit everything from the past to memory. Leave nothing out. Take with you your ancestors' prayer-fed strength. How am I to understand that? What does prayer-fed strength mean? What does it look like? From generation to generation, your ancestors would look upon an orthodox icon each day, pray to it and dedicate to it their thoughts, their hopes and their requests. It would hearken unto them and try to help, and with each day the icon itself would grow stronger. It will help you and has helped already. As well, esteem the Rosary and the Quran that were given to you by the Grand Mufti of the Muslims, and the Bible of your father Theodoret. Remember with reverence the day when you appeared before people in the great Christ the Saviour Cathedral, and the day when in the most beautiful La'alya Tayolpan Mosque you sat before the people who had crowded into the hall at a table, and alongside you were an Orthodox priest and a rabbi. You spoke of homesteads. Ecologists spoke in support of you. Do you recall that day? Yes, I do recall. The great Mufti organised that event, and the people of various faiths came to the mosque then, and they were all grateful to him. But I remember something different too. I remember the slanderous articles in the press. I remember how there was an orchestrated attempt to ridicule me on television, on Channel 1. Perhaps it is necessary, the slander directed toward you? Necessary? For what? What are you saying, Anastasia? You enter into a palace in a temple, a hero? Yes, only you were unable to bear up beneath the brass trumpets and the fanfare of speech. How can you be saved from yourself, by means of yourself? Come on, I have no self and no pridefulness, only fatigue. So that means that it was due to fatigue, Vladimir, that one day, when you appeared in the hall packed with readers in the capital of Belarus, you began to eject the bishop from the church publicly. That was due to fatigue? Oh, I wasn't serious about that. They told me before my appearance that he and the crowd applauded you. The collective thought was energized and took off. And what's up now with the bishop? But we are speaking not about him right now, Vladimir, but rather about you. You wanted to understand how you feel about religions, to get a feel for this and figure it out. Yes. You must do this only yourself, but I will tell you of future events. Perhaps the information concerning them will help you. It will happen before long that more than 150 leaders of various countries will come together. One question will they address, with scientists taking part: how to reduce the amount of harmful gases that are emitted into the atmosphere by human deeds. Gases that threaten the planet with disaster. But the 150 leaders of the earth will be unable to make a decision that will save us, and they will go their separate ways, and the harmful gas created by mankind will continue to kill the planet. What can you say about such a situation, Vladimir? What can I possibly say here? Heads of state have come together numerous times to solve the question of how to improve the ecological situation, but to no end. Most people don't pay any attention to these meetings anymore. Why is that? Well, because not a single state has announced any workable proposals. And if there aren't any workable proposals on the agenda, then what's the use of meeting? It only makes people laugh. And what would you consider a workable proposal? The kind of proposal where the majority of people on Earth will change their life's priorities. The desire will arise to perfect one's dwelling land, instead of working at harmful manufacturing plants to get money to subsist on. No ruler is in a position to stop these harmful manufacturing plants, because unemployment will arise and there will be riots, and this power will end up being threatened. That means that heads of state are not in a position to stop a global disaster, but perhaps different authorities, spiritual authorities, are capable of doing this. The patriarchs of all the religions will come together, give their word before each other that they will call upon their congregations to perfect the earth's dwelling land. Yes, exactly. They'd be able to deal with this question more effectively and have an effect on people and the authorities at the same time. And so that means that religions are important and needed. What do you think, Vladimir? Turns out they're important and needed, and it would be great if they could all together direct their efforts toward perfecting both the spiritual and material dwelling land. But we need specifics here too. Your plan, Anastasia, is unsurpassed in terms of specifics, and people's hearts and souls everywhere are embracing it. But there is one circumstance that calls into question how viable it is. What circumstance is that? There's no doubt that the way of life for a family on the family homestead that you've shown is greatly superior to today's way of life for people in cities and rural areas. And even now, the number of families living this way, without any support whatsoever from the government, is growing steadily with each year. And there might come a time when the majority of the Earth's population will want to have their own family homesteads and live on them. And at that point, there won't be enough hectares for every family that wants one. Even now, people are talking about how a portion of the population needs to be eradicated due to the fact that there's not enough living space and natural resources. According to these rumours, there should remain on Earth the so-called golden billion, plus 2 or 3 billion people who serve them. The Earth's population is now 6 billion, and people are already raising the question of restricting births, like, say, China, where 1,300,000,000 people live in an area comprising of 9.6 million square kilometres. If people's way of life begins to change in accord with your plan, then people's life expectancy will increase. And it's quite obvious and it's a quite obvious and undisputed fact that the life expectancy for a person living on a family homestead, assuming he has no harmful habits, here I'm talking about drinking, smoking and others, has an excellent diet, clean air and healthy water, will, on average, be twice as long. A family living on a family homestead will want to have children, and such families have a significantly greater desire to bear children than those living in modern cities. So it follows that before long, new families won't be able to get a hectare to build a family homestead. I understand that there must be some way out of this. When God was thinking of all that's beautiful, he can't have set up this kind of dead-end situation that would incite people to battle for living space. Your grandfather has said it's absurd and futile to explore outer space using current methods, and that there's another method. He calls it psycho-teleportation. But no matter how much you think about it, it doesn't appear possible to understand it in a detailed way. Basically, people don't believe it exists and science doesn't say anything about it. I'm also aware that the psychoteleportation method of exploring outer space and the planets and other galaxies does exist, but no one in my family line is privy to the details or mechanisms of this method. I hope that people who are now establishing family homesteads, or their children or grandchildren, will discover and grasp what helps its function, and this will definitely come to pass. But I understand your anxiety too, Vladimir. If a person already today cannot see at least a part of this mechanism, he will remain anxious due to its uncertainty regarding his family line. It is essential for us to grasp at least a part of it. I have been thinking tirelessly about it and searching, but I am finding only more and more confirmations all the time of its existence. It is possible that it's essential for us to lay out the logical lines of reasoning and to ask people who are familiar with science, with biology and programming to think together. We must discover it all together. Vladimir, we've arrived, announced Anastasia. This is the home. This is Grandfather's space. The family party. Anastasia's grandfather had always been notable for his unusual behaviour, even when speaking about very serious things. He'd always use humour to try to trip you up, and this time too he remained true to himself. When he came out into his glade, We saw Anastasia's grandfather sitting beneath a cedar tree with his legs crossed, looking intently at a staff stuck into the ground before him. It was clear that he'd long since sensed we were on our way to him, and besides, he couldn't help but sense our presence, but paid no attention to us whatsoever. And even when we walked practically right up to him, he still didn't turn in our direction and didn't greet us. We stood there silently for 3 or 4 minutes, then I whispered to Anastasia, "You try say something to him, otherwise we're just going to keep standing here like this." "All right, Vladimir, but I'm trying to grasp what he's up to here," Anastasia replied, also speaking softly. Then, all the same, she addressed her grandfather, saying, "We arrived quite a while ago, grandfather." And something totally odd happened next. Anastasia's grandfather, turning to the staff, suddenly said, "Due to unforeseen circumstances, I announce a 15-minute break." Then he stood up, led us off to the side, and completely serious began explaining, "I'm currently leading a party meeting of the family party. It will continue for another 45 minutes or so you'll have to wait." "How's that? A party meeting?" I asked, surprised. "There's nobody here, and besides, the family party hasn't been constituted yet." "Well, not by you, it hasn't been," Grandfather replied, "but I've constituted it for myself." "How's that? You've constituted it. Who's joining it?" "I'm joining it all on my own, and I'm preparing for the convention." "What convention, if there's only you in the party membership?" "For now, there is only I, but perhaps someone else will come along and constitute their own family party, and then we'll convene." "But how the heck is something like that possible?" "Well, you yourself said that we need to come up with something new, and so I came up with the idea that each person can lead his own family party, so no one will use his authority and position to put pressure on the party rank and file, and at the conventions everyone will be equal." "And what kind of agenda do you have here at this meeting?" "The government's report on the work is done in connection with perfecting the dwelling land." "Well, and do you have giving reports? And who do you have giving reports?" "Various people. After the break I'll be hearing from the Minister of Railway Transport." "But he's not here." "Not for you, but for me he is." "How about him? Does he know you'll be hearing from him?" I wondered. "He doesn't know. And really, why should I take him away from his work?" "But when and where will your convention take place?" "When the organisers set the date." "What organisers?" "Other family party leaders." Really, in spite of how comical Grandfather's display was, I do think the idea of creating a family party in which all are equal deserves attention. The usual way of organising a party won't get us anywhere, except to something resembling the CPSU. And this is where I can see some grains of truth. Each person is free to act in accordance with his own heart and soul, and rather than orders or a universal charter, different party members can initiate the best actions and endeavours and advances. It seems to me that in this case you'll end up with a lively community of people that develops on its own, in which each individual really can express his own initiative. As we took our leave of Grandfather, I said, matching his tone and trying to be serious, "From this day forward I also constitute my own family party." Why go on and on about it? It's time for each of us to take action. Further developments connected to Anastasia's grandfather deserve a separate book, and I intend to tell about them at a later date. End of that chapter. Exploring virgin planets. On our way back, as Anastasia and I were returning from seeing Grandfather, our conversation once again turned to the possible existence of a biological way for a person on Earth to explore other planets and galaxies? I reminded Anastasia. Anastasia, you mentioned that you think tirelessly about a biological way to explore other planets, and that you're finding logical confirmations of its existence. Can you lay out these logical lines of reasoning? We can begin now, together, to analyse the situation. Further on, you can continue on your own. All right, Anastasia, but you go ahead and start us off. First of all, it's essential to authoritatively establish the first fact. All that has been created in the technocratic world existed and is in a biological and significantly more perfected form. Do you agree with this, Vladimir? Do you understand how important it is to establish understanding? Of course I agree. I'm not the only one who knows that people do, too. Man used to be able to do calculations in his head a lot and faster. Each person had his own inner calculator. Well, you can cite a great many examples here. The example I like most is a person's birth. It's the clearest and most striking example because two methods exist simultaneously in the world now, the technocratic and the biological. The technocratic method is when scientists in a specialized institute take sperm from a man and an egg from a woman, mix them together in a test tube that they keep inside a special apparatus. They keep it at the necessary temperature and humidity, and basically, it takes a lot of fuss and resources. Now, the biological method is a lot simpler and more effective. A man and a woman in a bed, they enjoy themselves, and soon afterwards a person is born. A good example, Vladimir, only please take note of one very important detail. Even so, when a person is created, even if it is via a technocratic method, what lies at the heart of him is the biological material. Yes, of course, what lies at his heart? You can't get anything without the sperm and the egg. And the biological method has no need to adopt anything from the technocratic world. Agreed, not a thing. Well, except for a bed. Although you can get along without a bed too. Basically, Anastasia, I totally agree and I get it. The biological alternatives are significantly more perfected than the technocratic. When the technocratic man thinks up so-called inventions and brain children, he's replacing existing and perfected biological mechanisms with primitive technocratic ones. That situation is completely anti-rational. And nonetheless, time and time again, human civilizations, losing all memory of their natural capabilities, have replaced them with primitive technocratic alternatives. We are unable to imagine now how one can get to another planet using a natural method. And in this very same way, people of a different civilization were unable to imagine the birth of a child in a non-technocratic way. Many women today cannot imagine giving birth to a child without others' help, without a maternity ward and technocratic equipment. If we continue further along those lines, then more and more children will be born using surrogate mothers. Something resembling farms will arise, where women who have been artificially inseminated will be concentrated. Their whole lives they will bear children and give them up. They will be provided with food and lodging, but they themselves, each one of them, will see herself as an incubator for a human embryo. This has already happened in history, in one human civilization. In this same civilization, the practice of cloning of people was also developed. As a result, a person in this civilization was unaware that it was possible to give birth to a person through biological means. Lacking awareness of this, lacking this thought, a woman had no possibility of conceiving a child, no matter how much she entered into intimate relations with a man. Now, if a woman did become pregnant by natural means, After all, this was considered pathological, and the human embryo was immediately destroyed or was removed and grown artificially. Vladimir, do you agree with the assertion that any technocratic achievement is preceded by a person's act of losing the memory of his biological capabilities? I do. But now, tell me, can a person use a technocratic method to transfer an image, a photograph of his family homestead, for example, from one point on Earth to another, or into outer space? Of course he can, using a computer or the internet. All he needs to do is choose an electronic address, scan this image into his computer, go onto the internet and send it to the address he's chosen. And it will come up there on the computer. You can print it off the other computer using a printer. You can also send it into space too, if you know the spaceship's electronic address. You can send it to the moon too, and you can send an image from the moon to Earth. That's already been done. Good, Vladimir, very good. Only you've forgotten one very important detail. The most important. Which one? Before the person does all these various operations on the computer, the thought was born in him to send off the image. I agree. I didn't mention the thought because that goes without saying. But now tell me, can a person use a modern technocratic method to transfer not only an image but an object too, to all the points you named? An object? I don't think it'll work with an object. I thought about it for a brief time and then added, Anastasia, I remembered that there are lathes that carve various designs out of wood, little sculptures, for example, under the direction of computer programs. And if you send the computer program tasked with carving out the little sculptures to a different continent via an electronic address, or to the moon, then another computer there, if it's hooked up to the same kind of lathe, will carve out the very same little figure, and there will be two of them, one on my computer made, and the second that the other computer will carve out. In that way, a little sculpture I have will be copied on a different continent or on the moon. So it follows that one can use a modern technocratic method to transfer or copy and recreate an object even on a different planet. Yes, one can. But do you understand what this means, Vladimir? What? This means that there exists a biological method for transferring an object from one planet to another. And this means it is 1,000 times more perfected, simpler, and can be accessible to any person. This biological method requires the presence of no technology whatsoever. It is the human thought that is most important in it. Yes, I agree, and in the case of creating a child, the most important thing is the thought. But a man who's thought about creating a child needs a woman too. And a woman who's thought about a child needs a man. Together they materialize what they've thought. Together Vladimir, the possibility of creation and birthing of a person by a man and a woman is the highest achievement. This means that it is possible, all the more so, for a person to create life on another planet using a biological method. For now, it is unclear what components are necessary in order to materialize him. Yes, Anastasia, a tremendous discovery. It would turn out to be tremendous if you or someone else could find or discover these biological components. We need to think. It would be possible to comprehend and sense much were we to encounter that knowledge possessed by the people of the first civilization on Earth. End of that chapter.